I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. At a recent church leadership conference, I sat down with Kai Foster to find out what he's doing to grow his church in Reno, Nevada. The church there has doubled in the last 3 years. Find out Kai's secret to growing his church on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. I'm here with Kai Foster, the leader of the church in Reno, Nevada. Kai, welcome to the program.
Great to be here.
Kai, we're here in Long Beach at the Pacific Southwest Leaders Meeting, and it's been inspiring to hear just a little bit of what's been going on in Reno. And we talked a year or two ago, earlier, one of the episodes in the podcast, and you just shared about what God had been doing. But I want to have a follow-up talk with you about what God has been doing in Reno since we last talked. Can you just tell us what's been happening? Give us an update of what's happening in Reno, Nevada.
Thanks, Rob. The miracles that God began doing, the miracle work, the miracles themselves, God has continued, and more things continue to happen. Some follow-up is the church has continued to grow. We started at 28 3.5 years ago, and now we're at 60. Wow. And we had on some Sundays, we had no children's ministry because we didn't have enough kids pre-pandemic. And then post-pandemic, if you will, 2 years later, we have over 35 kids because of the growth of people just coming into the church, restorations, baptisms, and then people coming in and placing membership from another church outside of the ICOC. And they just keep coming. And so now we're in a building, and a church building, and we have classrooms that are full of kids, and kids are running around the sanctuary, and people just keep coming in. So God just keeps doing what God does.
Okay. Why is that? Like, what are you doing? I want to talk specifically about your evangelistic strategy. What is your plan? What are you doing that you would attribute the growth to?
I would say this. To be honest with you, I don't feel like evangelism is my strength, personally, or in how I've led churches in the past. But what's happened here to me, I feel like God wants to demonstrate His power always, and so I feel like the evangelism is a demonstration of God's power, or all these people coming to the church. So. For example, we had 120-something when we first got there 3.5 years ago, and God just started bringing 20-somethings. We weren't focusing on 20-somethings. He literally just started bringing them. So 20-somethings were converted, 20-somethings were moving in, and Reno is a fairly remote church. It's 2 hours from Sacramento. That's probably the closest church, and it's 8 hours from Las Vegas. And yet, so you wouldn't think 20-somethings would want to come to Reno, right. But 20-somethings are literally coming to Reno and wanting to be there and wanting to be part of the church. So we went from 1 to 11, and then we have another 7 that are regular attenders. And I know that for a small church, really for any church, that demographic, that age group is so important to the church. So we have that now, and some of those 20-somethings are married and they have young children, and we've had 9 babies born in 3.5 years since we've been there, and so God just keeps doing what He's doing. So we have that, and then we have we have people who are coming in who are pretty well established. So when we first started working with the church, the need was for the church to grow, and, and God just grew the church very quickly, very rapidly. But the cause and effect of it, I believe, really is coming from, before I do much of anything in ministry, I spend a lot of time with God in deep, more meditative prayer. And so it's usually 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours in a day. So I'll wake up and I'll go pray. The sun's not up, so I'll go and pray somewhere in the house. Then that's usually a good hour, sometimes an hour and a half. And it's pretty early. It's before 5 or 6, so I have the whole rest of the day to spend more time in prayer. And going out to the Truckee River, which is less than a mile from my house, 2 miles, I can go out there and be out there for a couple of hours. And that's already 3 hours. And then if I'm just sitting down and looking through my ministry later on in the evening, then I can, pull out a list, pull out the roster, or just sit, turn everything off, and pray some more. So that ends up being about 4 hours in a day. And depending on the weather, whether there's snow outside or not, I can go outside again in my backyard and pray some more. Wow. So I think because of the prayer life, because of what I'm practicing in my prayer life, it fills me more with the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And I pray for a lot of things. And then from there, I have much more of the Spirit. I mean, even if you thought about it in kind of a physical sense, I have much more of the Spirit on me. So when I go preach and when I go counsel and when I'm teaching or when I'm fellowshipping and when I'm worshiping, I have a lot of Spirit on me, and it rubs off on the people.
Well, I remember talking to you when we passed through there, and you said that you take with you a list of the names of the people in your church,
right?
And maybe activity calendar or something. I mean,
yeah.
just take a few things to trigger your thinking. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about that.
So I take a roster. I use 5x8 index cards, okay, which most people don't even know they make 5x8 index cards.
I thought it was 3x5.
No, they're 5x8 index cards. And what I do is I just take a Word file, and they have actually a 5x8 index card size when you print it. So I can print out the whole roster. And anyone who's studying on the bubble, if you will, about to become a disciple, I can put it on a card. I can fit it all on a card, and then I take the card with me. So I have the card with me, and I'll walk out by the river, and as I'm walking along the river and I'm praying, I'll sit down, and I'll have the card right in front of me, and I'm looking at the names. And for me, I'm very visual, so I'm looking at the names. It brings up a lot about the person. And as I'm praying through the roster, what I'm praying through is, if I look at, let's use a fictitious name, Joe Jones. I'm looking at Joe Jones. And let's say Joe Jones has a weak marriage. He's really struggling in his marriage. So I'll pray for Joe, and I'll pray for Joan Jones. I'll pray for them both. And then I'll pray for whatever the issue is. And then let's say so I pray for that, but then I ask God, how do you want me to shepherd them? How do you want me to help them? What do you want me to say? What do you want me to do? Is the way that I'm shepherding them now, is that what's best? How can I do it better? So with 60 people, if you're doing that consistently, I believe it puts you kind of in a place where you're more in touch with what's happening on a deeper way, because it's not just one big mass. It's individual souls and lives. And then when you get into that, and you're praying, and you take the time to pray, so you'll bring them before God, and then as you're bringing them before God, you put them before God, and then you're silent. You're still. You don't say anything. I often teach the church, ask God questions, and then after you ask the question, stop talking. Be silent. Be still. So put a question out, and then be silent, and listen, and be still. Then do it again the next day, do it again the next day, and do it again the next day. And the more you do it, I believe the Spirit reveals more and more and more. So it's an engaging of the Spirit, a conscious engaging of the Spirit through a lot of meditative prayer. That really helps me a great deal.
Okay. So, I've got to just talk to you about, first of all, why? Why? How did you even come up with this idea of I'm going to pray for 2 to 4 hours a day? Like, was there some sort of trauma in your life? I mean, like, that's, I would say, unique, different. Mm-hmm. I don't run into very many ministers that are spending that much time in prayer. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about, how did you develop this? Where did this decision come to you to say, okay, when I go to Reno, this is the way it's going to be?
That's a great question. Before we came to Reno, we were in another ministry, and it wasn't going well. Even though the church was growing and the membership was up and the contribution was up, there was still a lot of conflict in the church. So during that conflict, I started listening to a lot of different messages, different sermons from different speakers, and one of my favorites is Francis Chan. And Francis Chan mentioned in one of his sermons, would you rather have a minister who's charismatic or one who prays for you every day?
Okay, charismatic meaning like their speaking style is charismatic.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I really thought a lot about that. And I thought, okay, what if I really started to pray for people in a real way every day? So it started in my last ministry, and I would pray for people every day. And I would, our last ministry was 150, almost 160. And I could pray through most of the roster without anything, without any list,
right,
because of just the practice of prayer, consistent practice of prayer. So it started there. And then when we got to Reno, I just continued that practice. But I wanted to go deeper into more of a meditation, more of being still as I was praying. So in the previous ministry, I would walk around this park,
right,
for a couple 3 hours. It was a really tiny park. At the river, I can just sit by the river, or I can walk up and down the river, right, on the banks, and I'm surrounded by creation. So as I'm there and I'm praying, it's very, very, very meditative. And so another example that I think it would be more practical is I preach from an outline. So I preach from a printed outline. So when I'm preaching, I take the outline. I finish the outline long before Sunday. So I'll take it on Saturday, and I'll put it on a clipboard, and I'll walk along the river, and I'm praying, and I'll pray through each point of the sermon. And then I'll ask God, is this is what I'm going to say? Is it what you want me to say? Mm-hmm. This is what I feel you're really leading me toward. Is this really what you want me to do? So that's Saturday. On Sunday, our service is at 2:00. So I go back to the river, and any corrections that I've made from Saturday, any changes in the sermon, I put it on my notes, the same notes, on Sunday morning, and I go back to the river and I pray through it again. A little shorter, usually about an hour, but just kind of pulling all of my thoughts together, and then I go preach it at 2:00. So when the service is over, we live up the street, so I go home and I eat dinner, and then I go back to the river and I thank and praise God for what He did.
Wow.
And so everything that I'm doing, I try to, I don't know, I'm not always successful, I try to layer it with a lot of deep prayer, silence, solitude, and then I go do it. And it's just worked. It's just that's the best way I can explain it.
Okay, so what does BJ think about this? Like you're spending a lot of time out there doing, quote unquote, doing nothing.
Right.
She's working hard. She has a high powered job.
Yeah.
What are her thoughts on all this?
Well, we don't. We definitely don't pray the same way. And people ask her, "Do you pray like that?" Just no. And so, but she tells people, you have to find your own way in prayer, in a prayer that really transforms you. And I think that's the goal. I think that's key. If our prayer life changes us, which I believe it can, if we really go deeper. I mean, think of how much time you spend watching a movie, which is usually 2 hours.
Right.
How much time you spend on social media or doing this or that, watching a television show. If you spend a portion of that time in prayer consistently, then you'll go deeper and deeper. And I think, and what I told the church a few months ago was, if you're looking at my prayer life and you're thinking, well, I look at my prayer life, it doesn't look like that, and I couldn't do that. And I told them, you're right, in the sense of how you're praying right now is more. It may feel deep, but it's probably without trying not to offend anyone. I said it's probably more superficial than you realize. Mm-hmm. And if you really sat down and prayed deeply, and at times being silent before God, you start to experience presence.
Right.
And when you experience presence, I mean real presence, it's dynamic and it's powerful. And being filled with the Spirit, to me, is that. We have the Holy Spirit, but being filled with the Spirit, the way it's described in the Scriptures, don't get drunk, but be filled with the Spirit. You're like, wow, it's that. You're so intoxicated with the Spirit, it just comes out of you.
Right. Now that's very powerful. And it reminds me of the passage where the apostles are getting overwhelmed with the needs of a growing church, and they're like, "Hey, we're going to turn our attention to prayer and the ministry of the word. We're going to delegate the waiting of the tables to the deacons, but we're going to give our attention to prayer and the ministry of the word." And I thought, that was a lot of prayer. And I think about like Peter in Acts chapter 10 with Cornelius and that whole story. He's up on a roof meditating. He's up there, in a trance, having a vision. That became a turning point for the church. During these times, I go, okay, there's got to be something that helps us in our ministries to grow. God's got to be teaching us something to accelerate the growth of our churches, to build healthier churches, to come out of COVID and be stronger. You've seen some pretty amazing miracles happen, not just in doubling your church from 28 to 60 plus, but you've seen some financial miracles. Can you talk a little bit about the other ways you've seen the Spirit at work in your congregation?
Well, we were in a commercial building, and then we had to get out. We were forced out because of the pandemic. And we started meeting at an outdoor location that one of the brothers has a large ranch-style home. So we met outside, and it was great. I mean, it's a beautiful home, beautiful space, could easily hold 200 people. So we met there. Then in the fall, it was time for a building search, and my wife said, the women are getting cold.
Right.
And so I said, okay. But I didn't really want to do it. I didn't really want to start looking because I've done it many times and it's a chore. So I was dragging my feet, and then literally the next day we got a text from one of the members, and they said they were on Craigslist and they saw a posting for a church building to lease time in a church building, to share a church building, and I said okay, and so send me the info. So they sent us the info. And we contacted them, and they said, "How soon can you get in? How soon can you move in?" It was, literally, it was just such a short conversation. We toured the building. They said, "What do you think? We want you right now, and we want you." And then they told us, "We want you to stay forever. We want you to stay for as long as you can." So this building seats 275 in the sanctuary, has breakout rooms for children, full kitchen, playground, parking lot. And get this, my wife and I bought a house when we first moved to Reno, a year after we were there. The church building is less than a half of a mile
Oh my gosh.
from our house. It's literally right down the street. If a song comes on the radio as you're pulling out of the driveway, it's half over by the time you get to the building.
Wow.
It is that close.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's things like that. And then on the financial side, again, God demonstrating how great God is. Our contribution shot up right after we got there because the growth was so rapid, and which was great. We were getting the support from the PSW, the Pacific Southwest Church Planting and Strengthening Program, each year. But my wife and I decided, even though money was there, we decided to not take some of our salary. And my wife took no salary the first year, and then a small stipend the second and third year. And then I did not take any retirement for 3 years. And then at the end of the 3 years, all the PSW money was in place, and we had somewhat of a financial reserve when we started, and the contribution shot up. So we were in a good sound place financially. And then a brother from one of the other ICOC churches contacted me. He said, "You don't know me, but I know people from your past ministry 25 years ago in LA, and they speak highly of you, and we have made investments. They've paid off, and we want to help the Reno church because we may move there at some point in time." And I said, "Okay, that sounds great." And I didn't really expect a lot, and it ended up being, in the long run, over 6 figures.
Oh my gosh.
Or it was 6 figures. So it was amazing. And then within that, again, God demonstrating how great He is, because I feel like we look at our problems and then we make them human rather than heavenly. Mm-hmm. But a woman in her 90s was attending our services and attending some of our programs, and it was great. Some of our events, it was great. And one of the disciples in her 70s was helping her, that lived in the same area, and she passed, unfortunately. But after she passed, she left 3 months of what the church gives in contribution in her will to the church. So
that's awesome.
So when you see these demonstrations of power, right, you know it's not you. You know it's not. The strategy, if you will, is to, if that's what you want to call it, is really to be as close to God in transforming ways that you possibly can. And if you've been in the ministry for a long time, really changing, really making a drastic change. Okay, what does it really mean for me to be that close to God?
Right.
Because even in Middle Eastern religions and faiths, they pray 4 times a day. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at me in Western culture, and I'm thinking, well, what can I do? How can I do it? And so in going into deeper prayer, I feel like everything that we're doing is covered in the Spirit.
That's awesome. Let's just talk about what would be a first step, Kai? That's a lot. I mean, 3 to 4 hours. That's a huge step. So let's say a person's listening, like, wow, I'd really like to kind of test this. Where would a person start? What would you recommend?
Well, the first thing I would say is you don't want to approach deeper prayer as a tool for church growth, because that's obviously, I definitely am not endorsing that. But what I would say is I think God wants to grow every church. Right. I don't think He doesn't want to grow any church.
Of course.
Yeah, not grow any church. He wants. So I do think it's if your prayer life is, like, let's say 20 to 30 minutes, and you're a church leader. If you go 20 to 30 minutes, usually, which is my past practice, then go in increments. Go, okay, well, I'm going to pray for 30 minutes in the morning, but then I'm going to pray for another 30 minutes in the evening, because you will definitely change as you go through the course of your day with what you're thinking about, what you're looking at, what comes at you. So if you can start there, morning once, and then the afternoon or evening once, 30 minutes, you'll be amazed at how far that goes. Right. Then do it for a while. Do it for a while. A while as in weeks, months, for quite a while. Then in your prayer life, practice praise and really go for it. Aim for 30 minutes of praise. Like, let's say your morning prayer is all praise and your afternoon, evening prayer is all towards issues and bringing people or situations before God.
Right.
And then the more you do that, I think the Spirit will lead you to more of a place where you're in more of a meditative place as you're in prayer. Hebrews 5:7, Jesus prayed with loud cries and petitions. In Luke, he prayed overnight. So when you're looking at that, he didn't pray for 15 or 30 minutes at a time.
Right, exactly. I mean, he was taking extra time. And there's something that I've been thinking a lot about. I read John Piper's book at the beginning of this year, Desiring God. I reread that after a number of years. And, you know, one of the things I love about the book is he said, listen, we are designed to enjoy God, to find pleasure in our relationship with God. And I think the reason why I love what I hear happening in Reno, because the church is growing, it's benefiting, but what I also hear you saying is that's not just the reason why you're praying, is you're enjoying your time with God.
Exactly.
The activity itself is satisfying, and it brings you pleasure. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's a joy to pray now, whereas before it was a discipline. We just went through a series a few months ago, devotion over commitment. What does that mean? Well, the Bible doesn't really teach commitment as we think of it in our Western way. The Bible teaches devotion, love. But when you look at Christians who are lukewarm or not inspired, it's because they're committed to a Christ-like way, a Christian way or Christianity. So they'll attend, they come, they go, but there's no love there. The bride-bridegroom relationship, that marriage, is a loveless marriage. It's committed, but it's loveless.
Right.
So when I go to pray, I pray from that principle, in that if I'm in devotion to God, then it's love, it's joy. I could be out there praying and just being completely enamored by the same river that I see almost every day in different places, but I can be enamored, in awe of what God is, in awe of what He's done. Just looking at the creation, you look at all the different layers of trees and birds and rocks and the river and all the other creatures and so forth, and the sky and the mountains. We're so blessed in Reno. It's so beautiful. I can be enamored by that and taken by that every day. And so as I'm in that, I'm seeing how great, how big God is. And I take that into everything that I'm doing.
That's awesome. Well, Kai, thank you so much for the time, and really respect what you're doing. For so long, I've said this before, Reno was the sick man in our family of churches, or at least in our region, just struggling, kind of limping along, faithful but really troubled. And through your leadership and the power of God, it's flourishing, and it's really encouraging to me to see it happen. And I love to hear what's going on, because this is kind of a dark time in not just our family of churches. It's definitely not an ICOC thing, and we're talking about Christianity. It's a challenging time.
Yeah.
But what I see in you is there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of excitement, there's good news.
Yeah.
And that's the power of God, and I think it's a bright spot. And so I want to wish you all the best, and I look forward to imitating some of the things you're doing. I really want to explore that more in my own devotional life, and look forward to seeing great things happen, not only in Reno, but around the world.
Amen.
So thanks for the time.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you so much for joining the Rob Skinner Podcast. If you're enjoying this podcast, please hit the subscribe button and let your friends know about it and how to find it. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no-regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day, and make this life count.